So is this Vidura speaking with Uddhava? Okay. I wasn't sure it was Vidura and Uddhava or Vidura and Maitreya. So, Vidura's renounced the kingdom. And this is, I can't remember the chronology of this. It may be after he, no, because I think before the Balakurukshetra he only went away for some time and he came back when to save Dhritarashtra. But at this point he's finally given up the kingdom. This is after the Lord's passed away, I believe. And if I remember this section correctly, he is moving towards that point where he talks about how the Lord has manifested for some time and then he departs. And as we see earlier on in the first canto, when Arjuna he goes to Dwarka to see Krishna, but then Krishna departs, and before he gets there, and then when he comes back, he's very, like Yudhisthira is asking all these different questions because he's seeing all these inauspicious omens, and he's wondering what's going on, and then like gradually he's understanding what's going on really, because he sees that he's never seen anything as inauspicious as this, and so many irregular things are happening. And because during his reign, even though it wasn't Satya Yuga, it was actually better than Satya Yuga because Krishna was there, and everything was very auspicious. Everything was going nicely. And when he saw all these inauspicious signs, he thought, how could this be possible when the Lord Himself is present on the earth? That all these inauspicious signs are manifesting, and therefore, because he was very intelligent. He was known as Dharmaraj. He was the son of Yamaraj, and he really, clearly understood the principles of Dharma, especially after he had spent many days being instructed by Bhishma Dev on his deathbed. And so he understood that something very inauspicious had happened, and therefore, because he was intelligent, he actually concluded this could only indicate that Krishna has left. And for them, this was a source of great lamentation because Krishna was their well-wisher and protector. And we see here is talking in this verse in purport about how the sons of Pandu were able to win back the kingdom. But we can understand that was only by the mercy of Krishna, because if you look at the dynamic of the situation, is the Kaurava army was almost twice the size of the Pandavas, and they had, on the Kaurava army they had Bhishma, Drona, Kripa, Karna, all these great warriors, Bhurishrava, all these great warriors were on their side. Bhishma was considered to be the greatest of all the warriors. And he was what they call an Ativrata. It means like he could fight with unlimited soldiers and defeat them. And there's many stories in the Mahabharata describing Bhishma's prowess and how he would just very easily defeat so many great persons. Even like he fought with Parshuram. I can't remember how many days it was, but he fought with Parshuram for many days, and Parshuram couldn't defeat him. And Parshuram was an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it just goes to show how great a warrior that Bhishma was. And so, strictly speaking, Bhishma would have been able to defeat all the Pandavas on his own. He didn't need an army. But because of the desire of Krishna, because Krishna wanted the Pandavas to emerge victorious, then they did. There's that saying sometimes Srila Prabhupada will quote, Raki Krishna Marike, Mare Krishna Rakike, that if Krishna wants to save you, no one can kill you, and if Krishna wants to kill you, no one can save you. And we see, even in this world, we see sometimes in various circumstances, a person is put into a situation where, under normal circumstances, they would survive that situation, but for somehow or other they die. And the reverse is there. Sometimes people are put into situations where, how is it that they weren't killed? So we can understand. due to their karma, due to the mercy of the Lord, due to providence, whatever it is, that it's not their time, or it is their time. So in different situations, that these things happen. So we see here that also in the Bala Kurukshetra for the Pandavas, because Krishna wanted the Pandavas to emerge victorious, he wanted Yudhisthira to become the emperor and establish a righteous rule, which I think they did for 35 years. It wasn't very long, but it was only a short period. But he wanted that they were the rightful rulers. They were also pious. They were also religious persons. Whereas, because it mentions that right in the beginning of the Gita, the Acharyas talk about Dhritarashtra's questions. Because he's asking Sanjay. He says, now that my sons and the sons of Pandu have assembled in the place of pilgrimage at Kurukshetra, what did they do? Kimakuruvata Sanjaya, he says. What did they do? And the Acharyas comment that he was actually concerned about the influence of Kurukshetra, because Kurukshetra is a place of pilgrimage. And that's why he says, at the place of pilgrimage, what did they do? And the Acharyas, they comment because his sons were considered to be impious, whereas the Pandavas were pious, they were religious. And therefore he was worried that this place of religion, this place of pilgrimage would influence his sons to act piously. Because even though he would present himself as being, I don't want this to happen, actually he was the catalyst behind the whole thing. He was the one who wanted his sons to be the emperors because he liked being in the position of being the emperor. He liked being glorified. He was attached to the position, and therefore we see that he acted very, very inappropriately. And even during the gambling match, which was a completely irreligious act, the way it was done. As things were going on, he says, "What?" Because he couldn't see, but he was asking Sanjay, "What have we won? What have we won now?" And every time he heard about what they won, he would become happier and happier. And even when Draupadi was disrobed, he wasn't disturbed about that. So he was actually wanting this to happen, and he was wanting that the Pandavas, even though they were his brother's children, he didn't treat them equally. And this is also pointed out in the beginning of the Gita by our Acharyas, is the fact that he called the Pandavas, the sons of Pandu, he identified them as Pandavas, and his own sons as Kauravas, when actually they were all Kauravas. They'd all descended from Kuru. But he made this distinction. And we see here, and that's because he's not a great soul. Yet we see here, this story is being alluded to here, that when Pandu and his wives were living in the forest, I think it was at, I can't remember the name of it, the place where they were living in the forest. It's quite, I've seen photos of it. It's a very, very beautiful place. Nice peaks, and a lot of sages living there and things like that. But because Pandu had been cursed, that if he ever engaged in intimate embrace with his wife, he'd die. And this was after all the 5 boys had been born, and so he had 2 wives. He had Kunti and Madri, and so at one point he was in the forest. It was springtime, and he was just by the will of providence. We can understand by the arrangement of the Lord that he was attracted to his wife Madri. So he embraced her in this circumstance, and as a result of the curse, he died. Yet, when it came time to burn his body, Kunti wanted to enter into the funeral pyre, because it was actually in that day and age, the wife would enter into the fire with the husband, die with the husband, and she was saying to Madri, "Well, because I'm the senior wife, then it should be my privilege." But Madri is saying, "No, but I was embracing Pandu at the time, so it should be for me, Anyway, so backwards and forwards like this, and then at one point Madri said, "But I won't be able to look on your sons as my sons. I won't be able to treat your sons equally, but you, because you're a great-minded person, you will be able to look at our sons equally." And so on that, then Kunti agreed, and she let Madri enter into the funeral pyre. And so we see here, this is the point that Vidura is questioning. He's saying, are the sons, Nakula and Sahadev, are they being cared for equally? And the answer obviously is yes, because Kunti, she saw them as her sons. She didn't see them different because she was a great-minded person. And we see that Prabhupada, in the, I think it might be the 8th chapter of the first canto, he mentions how Kunti is one of our acharyas. Because you read those prayers, they're quite amazing prayers. And even we see that there's, is it chapter 5 or 6, where Ashwatthama is being chastised? And then Kunti is giving all these reasons. I think she gives 8 or 9 different reasons why he shouldn't be punished. And then Yudhisthira glorifies these reasons. There's quite an interesting discussion there. So we see she's actually a great-minded person. And therefore she didn't discriminate between her sons and the sons of Madri. She saw them as equal. And also we see how Yudhisthira and his brothers, Bhishma and Arjuna, also treated them equally. They didn't discriminate. Whereas we see people who have more of a materialistic perception, they do tend to discriminate. And it's very much the case in this day and age. I was talking with Dira yesterday about it, how we see that. I was talking to someone on the phone about it, how we see, and in devotional service we see it also, that people from particular countries will tend to gravitate together. Like if everyone's from Fiji, for instance, all the people from Fiji will hang out, and they won't feel sort of so friendly towards someone who's from a different place. But if we look at it in terms of the philosophy of bhakti, we can understand that ultimately we're all, as Krishna says in the 14th chapter of the Gita, he says, Sarva Yonisha Kunteya, Samavanti Mutaya, that I am the seed-giving father. The Sarva Yonisha Kunteya, he says, I'm the seed-giving father of all living entities. So one who's evolved in their Krishna consciousness can understand that all living entities are the children of God. And it's kind of interesting. There was a famous saint in Christianity, Saint Francis of Assisi, and he saw every living entity, whether it was a bird, a tree, whatever. He saw them all as children of God, and he saw the equality there. So, at least intellectually, okay, maybe we don't have the realization, but at least intellectually, we need to accept that all living entities are equal, because we're all ultimately a jiva soul. We're all, and just what's different is the external body. And if we discriminate on someone, against someone based on the body, it helps us to understand, oh, actually I'm not very advanced in my understanding of Krishna consciousness, because I'm discriminating based on the body. And of course we see, one level of discrimination may be, well, so-and-so is from this country, I'm from that country, I'm from Australia, you're from another country, therefore, we're different. That's one level of discrimination. But ultimately we see in this world that the discrimination is there. I'm in a male body, so-and-so is in a female body, therefore I'm attracted to them because they have a female body. There's also discrimination based on the body. But if we're actually advanced in devotional service, we don't see like that. We see that all living entities are servants of Krishna. And this is the stage of realization we're trying to develop, is to understand that ultimately all living entities are servants of Krishna. But because of our impurities, because of the conditioning we have, and this is a point that's discussed by Narad Muni. He talks about the stage of pure bhakti. And what does he say? Sarvapadi vinayamuktan tat paratvaina nimalam Hrishikena Hrishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Ruchate. There's this Sarvapadi means false designation, Upadi means false designation, Sarva means all. So he says, vinayamuktam, you have to give them up. You have to renounce all these false designations, thinking I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm Australian, I'm Fijian, I'm Indian, I'm whatever it is. I'm a postman, I'm a scientist, a chemist. All these different designations we have to renounce because they're not us. They're associated with the body. And as we see Krishna clearly points out in the Gita in the second chapter again and again and again to Arjuna, you are not this body, you are an eternal servant of Krishna. And so it says, Sarvapadim tat paratvaina nimalam. We have to become restored to this nirmala. Mala means contaminant, like the things that exude from the body, like from the eyes, from the mouth, from the ears, from the rectum, from the genital area. All these things come out of the body. They're called mala, impurities. So it says, so it is nirmala. We have to become without mala. Nir means like no or not having, or it's like a negative sort of thing. So nirmalam, we have to become without these impurities. Not meaning that we give up passing stool, but we give up all these different impurities that come upon us. And the prime impurity means we're thinking we're this body. That I am this body, I'm a controller, I'm an enjoyer. And so, and it says Shrishikena Shrishikesha. So by engaging our senses, this is the process that's given by the acharyas, by engaging our senses in the service of the proprietor of the senses, we're able to renounce this false identity. And they become restored to our original pure, it says, Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Ruchate. So this position is called pure bhakti. This position of service of Krishna is pure bhakti. So the idea is to give up all these designations. And the only way you can do it, you can sit down and read about it and rationalize it and philosophize about it, but it won't change anything. It's only going to be an intellectual understanding. But through the process of bhakti, by engaging, and this is a really important point that's mentioned in this verse, by engaging our senses in the service of the proprietor of the senses, especially when you do something, for instance, like deity worship, because you're coming into contact directly with the transcendental pure Lord, that you become purified by that process. And eventually what happens is through this process, it can be very rapid, that because your body's becoming purified through the contact with the Lord, then eventually it becomes fully spiritualized. And the same with the senses, they become fully spiritualized. So no longer do you identify with this material nature, but you identify yourself as a servant of Krishna. And the ultimate impurity is to think that I'm this material body, that I'm not, to think things other than being a servant of Krishna. And the ultimate purification is to understand that I'm a servant of Krishna. So we see here, because the Pandavas, because they're actually great servants. I mean, Arjuna is a great devotee of Krishna, very, very, very advanced devotee of Krishna. And the Pandavas are also all very great advanced devotees. They're eternal associates of Krishna. And, they were not on the bodily concept of life. Of course, we see in the Bala Kurukshetra, during the Gita, Arjuna's lamenting about this, and I'm going to have to kill all my relatives, and he says, oh Madhava, I shall not fight, and all these different types of things. He casts his bow down, and which the acharyas also point out, the fact that he put his bow down was a very significant thing, because he'd taken a vow that he would never put his bow down, but he put it aside. But the point there is this was all because Arjuna is an eternal associate of Krishna. He's not someone who's accidentally come into contact with Krishna for a short period of time, whatever. No, he's Krishna's eternal associate, and Krishna explains that in the 4th chapter of the Gita. That many, many times both you and I have taken birth together. Many, many times. It's always happening. He says, I remember them all, you don't. Why? Because Krishna is the Supreme Person of Godhead. Arjuna is a jiva. But by the arrangement of Krishna, Arjuna was covered over into thinking that these are my relatives. How can I kill my relatives? All this, this is the rationale or logic he's giving towards the end of the 1st chapter of the Gita. This Adami Vat Krishna Parushanti Kulastriya, where he's saying to Arjuna, to Krishna, if I kill all these people, it'd be irreligious. But then ultimately he gets to the end of the Gita. He says Karashe Vachamtava. Krishna explains all the philosophy to him, the reason why this is okay to do, and he says Karashe Vachamtava, that I'll act according to your words. And the acharyas explain that the Bhagavad Gita wasn't really spoken for Arjuna, because Arjuna is eternally liberated. He's Krishna's eternal associate. The Bhagavad Gita was spoken for us. But Krishna put Arjuna in this position simply for the purpose of delivering the Bhagavad Gita to the conditioned living entities. The same in the Bhagavatam. The whole first canto, the 19 chapters or 18 chapters of the first canto, the 19th chapter is, the conclusion of it. But the whole first canto essentially gets us to the point of Shukadeva Goswami appearing on the scene. Why? Because Shukadeva Goswami was going to deliver this spotless Purana, this Amala Purana, the Srimad Bhagavatam. All that pastime in the first canto is simply to get us to the point of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So Krishna makes these arrangements, and the Bhagavatam, Lord Chaitanya glorifies the Bhagavatam as the most important scripture. And we see it's also glorified in the first canto. Krishna Swadhamahari Dhamagani Visakalanashti Rishamase Puranaka. This Bhagavad Purana is as brilliant as the sun and has arrived just after the departure of Krishna from his own abode. Persons who have lost their vision due to the dense darkness of ignorance in this age of Kali shall get light from this Purana. So persons who have lost their vision, how many people have lost their vision in this age? Every single person. They've got no idea. They think they're the body. They think they're enjoying this material world. And it's kind of interesting. I was speaking with Dira coming from the airport yesterday, and we were talking about how in the beginning of this pandemic, right, people were sort of starting to feel, I should give up meat because all this is pandemics come from these markets, where they're killing animals and stuff like that. And I should live a healthier lifestyle. I should do this. I should do that. But how long did it last? A few weeks. Then they go back to normal. It's like this. You've heard of this term, this smasan vairagya. Where when smasan means a cremation ground. So, and vairagya renunciation. So the people at the cremation ground, their dear relative has died, and then they think, this life is just misery. I should give up all this material enjoyment and just devote my life to spiritual, higher thought, spirituality, things like that. So while they're at the cremation ground and their relatives being burnt, they're thinking like that. But then they walk out and immediately it's all forgotten. Or maybe a short time afterwards, and they go down the pub and have a few drinks and beers and stuff like that, and they're with their friends and having a great time. It's straight back into it. And this is it's described how Maya she has the avaratmika shakti and the prapekatmika shakti. So the avaratmika pushes down and the prapekatmika covers over. Maybe I got the wrong way around, but anyhow, there's these two potencies of Maya. And so this is what's happening, is the living entities are very, very quickly being covered over by the material nature into thinking that this material world is a place of enjoyment. So that's because we're identifying with the body. As long as we identify with the body, we'll struggle to understand the actual position in this world. And this is why we see that Prabhupada repeatedly brings up this point. You're not this body, you're spirit, soul, you're servant of Krishna. Give up your attachments to the material body. He repeatedly brings up this point again and again and again. This is being demonstrated here because we see how the Pandavas and Kunti, they treated all the sons equally. Not that, because they're Madri's sons, they're different. And we're Kunti's sons, we're better. That never entered, that element of false ego never entered into their relationship. It just wasn't there at all. They were brothers, they were equal. And even we see, there's an interesting story that the Pandavas, they went to the Swayamvara of Draupadi, and then Arjuna won Draupadi, and then they were staying in disguise in a potter's house, and they disguised themselves as Brahmanas, but they were staying in this potter's house. And then when the Pandavas they came back to the house, and they said to Kunti, Mother, come see what Arjuna has won at the Swayamvara. And she said, just share it equally amongst yourself. She had no thought, of anything like that, and she didn't even know that it was Draupadi. And this is how they, they thought that, or how it came about that they all married Draupadi. And another example is when they had left the house of Laka in Varanavatar, then they went and stayed with a brahmana, where this particularly powerful Rakshasa was living. And there was this thing where the Rakshasa had made an agreement with all the townspeople. It's like every month or whatever it was, you give me someone to eat, and I won't harass you. I won't come and steal. So happened that the house they were staying is that it came their turn that they would have to sacrifice someone, and they were all lamenting about it. And then Kunti said, "Don't worry, I'll just send one of my sons." And because she knew that and it wound up that she sent Bhima. And part of the rationale she had for choosing Bhima was she knew that he'd kill the Rakshasa is one thing, but also that she felt that any of her sons could do it. But then if she had sent either Nakula or Sahadev, one of the rationales she gave is people will think I'm discriminating against Madri's sons, so I'll send my own son. And because she had that, she was a great-minded person, and so she didn't discriminate like that. So that's like an indication that someone's not on the bodily concept of life, is they don't discriminate against someone else based on externals. And we see very, very great-minded souls, liberated persons. They see all persons as equal. Someone who's completely off the bodily platform of life. So there's an interesting discussion here, and it's just pointing out, how, because the first part's talking about how the Pandavas see everyone as equal, and in the end it's talking about Duryodhana. How he was kind of like the enemy. I wasn't really prepared to speak. But any thoughts, comments, questions? Huh?
Thank you for your question. Just on this point of how you may not have a real idea, but if you still intellectually, based on intellectually, most of the time, especially in Kali Yuga, it's very difficult to have a mind fully forced. So even though you're intellectually there, it's like end up to that way.
Yeah, it does help, but as I was saying, quoting that verse from Narad Muni, this Savapati, the Shrishikena, Hrishikesha, you have to, there's no point just studying the Bhagavatam on its own, because it just becomes, armchair philosophy, as Prabhupada would call it. It's just book knowledge. And there's no point just like rendering service without studying. You have to do both. You have to have the both hand in hand. You have to engage actively in service to Krishna, but also study the philosophy. But of course, having the intellectual knowledge, at least intellectually accepting this knowledge, the idea there is that, at least the way I look at it, is like, by regularly studying Prabhupada's books and trying our best to absorb this knowledge, when we're acting in ways that are not compatible with this understanding that we're all servants of Krishna, then we can reflect on that and say, okay, I've done this, this, and this, and this. And this is not really, in keeping with the philosophy. Why have I, you sort of start to analyze yourself, and it's kind of like this introspection, looking at our acts, trying to understand why, and we see, in the third chapter of the Gita, in verse 5, Krishna points out that the living entity is forced to act according to the modes of material nature, cannot refrain from action even for a moment. So we can see how the modes of nature are having their influence upon us. We can see how the mind is having its influence upon us. We can see how our conditionings are having their influence on us. And I look at that sometimes with myself, and I can see people who have come from a more refined, if you like, background or have had a better upbringing than, say, someone like myself, how they're not so challenged by the things I'm challenged by. We all have our challenges in this material world, but they're kind of there's gradations. Some are very base, and some are more refined. But we've all got our challenges, and these things come from our conditioning, from the modes of nature that affect us, etc., etc. So it's good to be able to be introspective and look at how we're being influenced by these different things. Try to identify what it is that's affecting us, and then look for solutions. And it's not good to say, "Oh yeah, I'm affected by this," and just accept. No, how do I get out of this? It's just like the sheep in the hole philosophy. All the sheep are down the hole, and they're wondering how they got there. But is that really important? What's the important thing is to get out of the hole. So it's okay. Identify what it is that's going on, but then identify appropriate remedial action. What can I do? Okay, so I have this particular type of desire. Like, every time I see prasadam, I have to eat it. So maybe in the beginning you might want to, indulge that a little bit, just so that you become habituated to only eating Krishna prasad. But at some point, you're going to need to regulate the tongue. So the idea is, to try and restrain the tongue from eating too much. All the different senses. The senses are always seeking to engage with the objects of the senses, and depending on what mode of nature they're influenced by, that's the type of object they'll gravitate to. If the tongue's influenced by ignorance, it'll gravitate towards rotten things, stale things, decomposed things, stuff like that, meat and all that sort of stuff. If the tongue's influenced by passion, it's going to gravitate towards very passionate foods, hot, spicy things like that. Whereas if the tongue's influenced by goodness, then you'll gravitate towards sattvic foods. And the same with all the senses. So it's good to be analytical, if that's possible, to try and understand what's going on, but then also to identify what it is that we can do to overcome that. And of course, the ultimate solution, the only solution really, is to engage the senses in the service of Krishna. Just being analytical is not going to solve the problem. You have to connect the senses with Krishna. Otherwise, because you've only got two options really. You've got Krishna or the material nature. You don't have any other option. So if you're not connecting with Krishna, you're going to try to find peace and satisfaction in the material nature, which doesn't happen. It won't work. Okay. Anything else? Okay, thank you very much for Prabhupada ki, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda ki, Jai Nitai Gopremanandi. Hare Krishna.